here the day after the Nubo Iron Eggnog Jog. If my voice is a little grumpy, it was 2 times 9 hours straight of commentary. And Malindi, I can't tell you how exciting it was to see people actually be at a real race. There were literally people crying. I've never had people get to the finishing line and literally look over and bow and kind of mouth the words, "Thank you very much." It was a race that looked like it might happen, might not happen. Peel got shut down, but in the end, we were able to kind of pull off of 900 people doing a 5-kilometer run and realizing just something so simple as us getting together to run, something you and I have done 1,000 times in events, how important it is when it's been taken away in this odd year. So first of all, thank you for joining us. I know that you're in between lots of meetings and taking care of children, so thank you for a few minutes of your busy time.
Howdy, good to be here.
Awesome. So I'd like to go back because I kind of knew you as an Athens athlete, and then obviously as a triathlete down in Tucson when you got going, and then your great triathlon career, and then so excited to watch what you've been able to accomplish around the Canadian record in the marathon. But could you take me back to like young Malindi? Like what was happening at 7, 8, 9, 10? Were you in running? Was your family in running? How did you ever get into this crazy sport?
The crazy sport found me. Funny enough, I started off in soccer like a lot of people, but my mom signed me up for soccer when I was in kindergarten because she thought I was becoming a little too sedentary, and I liked to color and draw and do quiet things, and she wanted to make sure that I could be active and healthy. So she asked me if I wanted to join soccer, and I had no idea what she was talking about. I didn't know what the sport meant, but she said that my younger sister was too young to join, therefore I wanted to join because I always liked to do things my sister couldn't do when I was little. So I got into soccer, and that was kind of my passion through childhood and through my high school years, and had hoped to continue to play soccer into university until it sort of became apparent that I was a better runner than soccer player. But along the way, my parents were super awesome about exposing my sister and I to as many sports as they could. So we downhill skied and cross country skied and did gymnastics and ballet, and I played field hockey at school and soccer, like pretty much sampled everything. And my parents kind of left it up to us to decide what we wanted to focus on as we got older.
As a parent now, do you think that was a benefit? I certainly watched Simon Whitfield's family, who he played basketball and soccer and track and all of these sports. They wouldn't let him just kind of specialize, even though all these running coaches wanted him to just be Simon Whitfield, the runner. Do you think that, kind of having that diversity of a little bit of exposure to everything was beneficial for you personally? And is it kind of something you might be considering with your own children?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I am really a big fan of a multi-sport approach for kids. And, Graham, my husband, also did a lot of sports growing up. So we kind of feel like if you're an athlete, then you can be good at sports later on. Like you can focus on 1 or 2 sports later on, but there's so much value in the skills that you learn, both like social skills like teamwork and leadership from being on a team with different people for team sports. And then, I'm not by any means a natural athlete when it comes to gymnastics or ballet, but learning coordination and proprioception and balance and all those skills, even though that didn't become my sport, I think have helped me become a stronger athlete over time. So my 6-year-old right now, he's in gymnastics, he's in soccer, he's in, he would be in swimming, but that's too hard to get into right now with COVID. And, he rides a bike and he plays, and we're in skiing. So we're kind of trying to expose him as well. And also I think it's super important as a parent and when I was a child that the parents let the child decide at some point what their passion is. So my kid may not end up being a sports kid because he does other things too. And we're going to, obviously be supportive of kind of whatever direction he ends up going.
It's amazing to see Olympic parents. In many cases, their kids will pick something else. They're into art and that kind of thing. And it's great to just let them kind of find their own passion, not to have to be the next hockey player just because your dad played in the NHL or whatever the case may be. So was high school running important to you, or was it something that just happened around you being a soccer player who happened to obviously, the high school running coach is going to say, hey, that soccer girl's a pretty good runner. We need a couple more women for our cross country team as we get closer to championship. Where did it fit in terms of importance?
Well, that actually is pretty much what happened. So my high school cross country coach, who ended up being my club coach, who ended up being my coach for 20 years. So went through high school with him, and then my whole international career Olympics with him. He showed up at my field hockey game one day when I was in grade 8. And he knew it was the last game of the season because he had already talked to my parents, and my parents said, Malindi can't do any more sports. She's already busy enough with soccer and field hockey. You'll have to wait till something is over. So he figured out what the last day of the field hockey season was and showed up and said, okay, now you can come run cross country for the team. And
what was that nameless's coach? What was his name?
Oh, sorry, that's Mike Van Tegum.
Okay, absolutely. Terrific. So he's done his strategic plan. I know that one season's ending. I got to get this girl before she gets on basketball team or volleyball.
Yeah.
And so that was the lead through the high school experience as well with that same person?
Yeah, so he was at my high school he transferred to another high school shortly after, but he was the coach of the high school, and he just showed up and said, we've got zones and valleys and provincials left this year. It was kind of mid-season. And you don't need to come to practices. You just need to come race, because he needed a girl for his team, and we had a really good team. And so I did, and it's pretty funny because so I was about 4th girl on the team. So we ran grade 8 to 12 all together at that point. That was, a high school team in BC in the 90s. And so I was about the 4th runner, and then we show up to BC high school championships, and they line you up. One person from each team gets a spot on the start line, and everyone else kind of lines up behind the top runner on the team. So I was about 4th or 5th, and I said to Mike, does this mean I need to stay in 4th the whole race?
I can't pass the other 3 girls on the team.
Pretty much. Well, I just respected them so much too. I was like, they're older than me. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And no, once you're off the line, you can do whatever you want. And we laughed afterwards because I ended up finishing 9th in the race and beating all the girls from my high school, and our high school actually ended up winning the team title that day. So it was a good thing I clarified that.
So we see obviously some natural talent came out pretty quickly. Did that kind of inspire you to want to kind of put more energy into running, or was soccer still the thing you thought that was going to take you off to college, maybe on scholarship?
Yeah, I was sort of torn for a few years because I wanted to do both. And I also had a really extreme case of nerves when it came to running. I got really, really anxious. So while I enjoyed running and I knew I was good at it, and I did really love competing and I loved when things went well, I really would work myself into quite a state before races, where soccer was lower pressure and more fun because I didn't care quite as much. So I did go through a few years where I wasn't actually sure if I would stick with running because I would put myself through so much mental anguish.
So we're coming towards the end of high school. I've got to imagine that the U.S. schools are calling, the Canadian schools want you to come. How did you make that decision where to go?
Well, we were pretty naive at the time, my family. Internet was completely different. No social media. Email was just really getting started. Like we're talking, the late 90s here. And the coach from Rice University came up to Canada to watch our national track championships, and he was really awesome. He ended up traveling up to my hometown to meet with me and basically taught me everything that I didn't know about Division I and different conferences and recruiting. We were completely in the dark. We had no idea of what happened in a recruiting process or picking universities. And in the end, I decided I didn't really want to be in Houston, although he was a good coach and it was a good university. And so I went on a couple recruiting trips. But actually my second recruiting trip was to Stanford University, and I just absolutely fell in love. It was February and the bougainvillea were out blooming and the team was amazing and the school was beautiful. Like the university itself is a gorgeous campus and it's a great academic school and they're a top athletic program. So it was kind of like a win-win-win. And in the end, I had a scholarship offer there, but it wouldn't cover the full amount. So I had to just beg my dad that he would help me out so I could go there.
So in fact, it's an interesting scenario. Lots of athletes, if they don't get everything covered, they could end up spending more to go to the US with the extra stuff they have to pay for than if they'd gone to UBC or one of the Canadian schools. Obviously, it's not inexpensive. Talk about your era down there. Was it a positive experience? Were there injuries down there? Was it, because obviously when you're a young high school kid thinking of America and California and the sunshine and those big schools, I mean, it's got to be just, spectacular thought. So how did it actually turn out for you in terms of the practicality of it?
Yeah, again, it was sort of mixed. I went into as a freshman, as an 18-year-old, and coming again from a multi-sport background where I did soccer 5 or 6 times a week and ran only 3 or 4 times a week, and just was able to run fast off of basically my soccer training. It took me a long time to adjust to a full training load, so I ended up with 4 stress fractures in the first 2.5 years there, and really raced very little and kind of struggled with that transition. But I had great teammates. I had good coaches. I was getting a degree that was meaningful. So it was worth kind of getting it out. And by my 4th and 5th years, well, actually my 3rd year, I went and did a semester abroad in Paris, and I trained on my own. And that was actually for me, like the best thing I could have done, because I was able to just take that couple months to reset and I designed my own running program. I got really fit. I was healthy, came back. And then my 4th and 5th years, I ran really well for the school. So I was happy to finish on a high note.
The Olympics, for most of us, if you're in amateur type sports of, basketball and for women and track and field, triathlon, cycling, the Olympics are one of those kind of pinnacle things. When did it become on your radar screen of something that Malindi was looking forward to becoming an Olympian?
Longer than I probably can remember. I remember watching the 1984 Olympics when Joan Samuelson Bonet won the first women's race in LA. And I have, memories of being inspired by that, and always being really inspired by the Olympic movement and wanting to learn a lot about what it meant, and following athletes' stories. So I think that it was something that really resonated early on. And then it became more and more clear that was a major goal for me, as I hit my late teens and university. And it's really, I'd say, what held me through the rough patches of my years in university, that I had this goal that was a bigger picture goal that was beyond what I was doing at the moment, that I had to kind of get through the bad stuff to still realize my dream.
So you get to Athens, 1,500 meters. I was there, phenomenal, historic place, where the Olympics kind of began, modern Olympics. Talk about your Athens experience of, were you able to march in with the team? That whole experience of, did you stay in the village? How did that whole experience unwind for you?
Yeah, the experience that you see on TV, which you would probably know, Barrie, is different than the experience you see firsthand.
Sure.
So I did stay in the Olympic Village. It is a bit crazy at times. There's a lot of people, a lot going on. It's funny because it's like, while it's a massively important athletic pinnacle event of your life, it's also a super social time, because you're living with people. You're in the dining halls, sitting around eating and chatting for hours after you eat. You're seeing, these big Olympic stars walk through the village, and you kind of get starstruck. So it was pretty cool, because on one hand, it was my dream to race in the Olympics, but on the other hand, just like being part of that movement and that energy. And of course, in Greece, it was so historic to be there. And Greece in itself is such an amazing place. So there's a temptation to do a lot of sightseeing and not miss anything.
Yeah, it's a very interesting scenario. I mean, for some of our young viewers, some of our young 15, 16-year-old women who are thinking about the Olympics down the road, what's happening now in some of the teams are that they're actually not staying in the village till after they're done, because of all of the distractions. And, we were lucky in Athens or in Sydney, because the triathlon was the first 2 mornings. So, it's like being done your final exams and being able to stay in residence for 16 more days to party, versus the poor Daniel Agali wrestler who literally had his final on the last day of the closing ceremonies, is his gold medal match. So he had to stay focused for the entire 17 or 18 days. So now what's happening in many cases, athletes are going into the village after they compete. They would have stayed in a condo with their teammates for, to be away from the distraction, not travel so far to get to the stadium. And so every team's got to kind of come up with their own strategy. Did you feel like when you went to Athens that you were going there to get something done? or was it, in some cases, I've seen first-time athletes, they're really kind of not expecting they're going to do something special. It's get there, look around, get the experience, be ready for 4 years later. How did that unfold for you? Did you feel the athletic component of it, actually you were there ready to race at a high level, or was it overwhelming in your first experience there?
I kind of a little of all the above. Like I came into the summer super fit, but I think by the time I got to Athens, I was a little bit plateaued or burnt out from the long season of racing. And unfortunately, a few weeks earlier, I had gotten sick when I was in Zurich or London doing some pre-Olympic competitions. So I got pretty run down, and then had to kind of take a week or two off of training just leading into the Olympics to get healthy. I just had like a respiratory virus, cough, that sort of thing, which isn't a big deal, but it is a big deal when you're a few weeks out from the Olympics.
Yeah, no question. And again, for our viewers, what's not uncommon is you've done all these great things to run really fast, and then you feel like there's something you have to do different or special because it's the Olympics. I mean, I've been running really well on this mileage and doing these number of strength and whatever workouts, but because it's Olympic year, we've got to add a few more intervals or a few more, miles, whatever. And it's not uncommon to see athletes, kind of get to the games not in the best. They're a little injured, or they're coming dealing with some either mental burnout, whatever the case may be. You come out of Athens, how do you make the next decisions at your career? So that's 2004. How old would you be in 2004? What would your age have been?
So I was 24 then.
Right. So still peak years ahead. Still, you're not past your prime. I know there were some injuries on and off, lots of wins and lots of great performances. But kind of talk about those next 4 or 5 years that because lots of people just see when someone's on top of their game, they go, "Wow, it must always be great." There was no setbacks, no challenges. What kind of happens in those next 4 or 5 years after Athens between challenges, setbacks? Did you do more schooling? What happens in that next era?
Yeah, so I did have some more injuries, and unfortunately I had one that lasted about 2 years. It was a navicular stress fracture in my foot, which came at a time when I was like really at my peak fitness in 2007 leading into 2008. And so that was a big management issue. But in the meantime, yeah, I moved to Calgary. So I graduated from university the year before Athens, and I moved to Calgary, and I was doing my master's in environmental design, which is like urban planning. And then I was actually kind of a busy couple years, actually, if I think about it, because then I started working part-time just because I'm the kind of person who needs to actually be a little bit busier than some people, and to keep my focus and keep my energy level balanced. I don't do downtime very well. And thankfully we finally stopped fighting that because it's counterproductive. But and I got married, and we bought a house, and we got a dog, like all those kind of important mid-20s life steps kind of occurred between Athens and Beijing, which I feel like I kind of grew up in that period of time. Went from being, fresh out of university to, pretty established in my life, and things since then haven't, besides having the kids, haven't changed a whole lot.
So for some of the viewers who aren't totally familiar, you're talking about Graham, one of our greatest 1,500 meter runners in Canada's history. I knew Graham Hood when he was 14 or 15 years old in Burlington and training in Westdale with Jeff Gaynor and some athletes. And I knew his talent then. You could see, what was going to happen. So you're married to an Olympian. You are an Olympian. It would be easy to pack it all in. You both have got your rings. You've been there. You've done that. I remember getting an email or a phone call from you. Just a bit of advice, and you're starting to think about this crazy multi-sport triathlon world. And many of the athletes who come into triathlon have dealt with injuries, and so while I'm waiting to get over the stress fracture, I do some swimming, or I'm on a bicycle and find that I'm enjoying being outside. How did that transformation happen for you? And I mean, obviously, we'll talk in a second, but you moved in and brought all of those life skills of being a world-class athlete into triathlon, and people who didn't even know who you were suddenly like, wow, did you see what that girl did? I didn't even know her name a month ago, and she's done these special things. But what was the impetus to go into triathlon after being an Olympian and such a great running career?
Yeah, kind of as you described. Graham had retired from competitive running actually before we even really met. So I didn't really know him as Graham the runner. And he was dabbling in triathlon and loving biking. So I bought a bike, and next thing you know, we were going on bike rides together. And so, yeah, as my kind of track career started to wind down, it just seemed natural to join him at some triathlon events, because he was having fun with it. And, you know, there's good camaraderie, there's great people involved. So we started going to races. And at that point, I hadn't signed up yet. I hadn't taken quite the bite, but we came down to Tucson, as you recall, and did some riding with your group. And I think it was after we did a Mount Lemmon climb that Graham said, "You have to do a triathlon now. You're too good a cyclist."
We know you can run, obviously. And did you find that that those years, and, you know, to kind of speed through, you kind of did the shorter stuff and then onwards to the Ironman racing, and obviously when you can run well, it is a nice asset to have after coming off the bike, and you put in some of the finest women's runs, you know, that I've seen in the last 35 years. Did you enjoy those couple of years? Was it a mental break from something different of going around the track? And we'll come in a second, but just kind of talk about those couple of years, because now you've got a whole new career. People don't know who you are, and you're showing up as, you know, even though you're an Olympian, you've had this distinguished career. You're this kind of newbie again back in a sport. You're the new person in the sport.
Yeah, I loved it. It was totally like reinvention and refreshing, and I felt really revitalized, and I had no expectations, and so many of the pressures of the track where every second counts and every split counts was just like, you just go ride your bike, and you get outside and you're doing different training. And in fact, I did very little running in those years, so I just focused on biking, which was fun, and then swimming, which for me isn't as much fun, and I'm not very good at it, but it was a necessary evil to get to the bike run. So, and, you know, in a lot of ways, the challenge of learning a new skill was fun. Like that cognitive leap that you have to make to become a semi-quasi decent swimmer was a good challenge.
So I've been seeing some blogs out there. You would have seen a couple of my comments recently on people saying, you know, who's this marathoner, and she maybe should have been doing this marathoning since she was 19 or 20 instead of starting later in her career. When did that kind of, maybe I'm going to look at it Olympics one more time, when did that kind of come back into the focus, or was it just, I'm going to run a marathon, no Olympics even in your mindset? And then when you suddenly put in some of the best runs ever, and then eventually last year destroying the Canadian record, that the Olympics now back on the radar screen?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've only done 2 marathons. I did one in 2019 in January, and then one last year in 2020. And so the first one I did, my second son was 6 months old, and I knew that I didn't have the time to go to the pool and do the long hours on the bike anymore. So I thought, well, I'll just get back into running again. But I hadn't, like, literally, my goals were not at all at the Olympic level. I just wanted to do a marathon because I'd done a couple Ironman, and I thought, well, it's got to be easier than doing an Ironman first to do the run. I don't need to do the swim and the bike to get to the run. And so after I did my first one in 2019, and it went really well, Graham and I kind of looked at each other, and we realized that there was a lot of opportunity for me to still improve. And I think I was just turning 39 then, and we thought, wow, like, this is such kind of a gift, really, that I have another shot of trying to make an Olympic team, when truly in 2012 I had laid that dream to rest again. I hadn't made it back since 2004. We were moved on in our lives. We had kids. We were happy with doing what we were doing, and I didn't ever have this feeling of regret or feeling that I needed to go redeem myself still. It just kind of came out as like a really pleasant surprise, really.
And you know what, in the interviews and various things I've read, it felt that way too, that this was just a nice kind of, it happened. It wasn't, you know, sometimes you see people put too many strategic plans together and then things don't come, they're feeling pressured, et cetera. I think Graham was working with you in coaching going into that last marathon. Just talk about having a husband or a close, you know, family member, whether it's your dad or whatever. How do you separate the two when it's on the one side, I need you to go out and put in 2 10-mile repeats at this time, and on the other side, you know, it's you haven't eaten enough today, or we've got to go and take the kids off for some flu shots or whatever the case may be. That's an interesting challenge to deal with.
Yeah, well, I'm so lucky because actually just about an hour ago, a couple emails circulated and Graham was updating the team on my last block of training. And so that team still includes Mike Van Tegum, who was my initial high school coach, and Trent Stellingworth, who's head physiologist for the Canadian Sport Institute in Victoria. So that's kind of our advisory team, and Graham, and he kind of leads it, but he collaborates really nicely with them. And I think it works exceptionally well. I think the big thing for Graham and I is that we both really respect each other and we communicate well, and we see this as truly a team project, that we're in it as partners, obviously in life and raising children, but also in this athletic quest to try and do something really cool together.
Well, obviously, you and I weren't in Tokyo this summer as we had anticipated. I was supposed to be over doing some CBC coverage, and you out on the marathon course. When did you kind of come to grips with the fact that it wasn't likely that you would be racing in Tokyo, and you would need to kind of rejig your goals and to look forward to a 2021 versus a 2020?
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually figured in about February last year that this is not looking good. And it was more because of what was happening in Asia than what was happening in North America. And so to me, when the Olympics were postponed, it was more of a relief than anything, because I felt like we were doing the right thing as a country. And we were, as you may recall, maybe the first or second country that said we're not going to send a team. So I felt like that showed really good leadership. And I was on board with that. So yeah, it reframed the year. And it's funny, my dad said the other day, oh, if it had been a normal year, this would have already have happened 4 months ago already. And it just shows you, it's amazing the passage of time, right? Even though it feels like time is dragging through this COVID period, time has moved forward. We're a good 9 months into this, and hopefully we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and that we will be in Tokyo and Sapporo in 2021.
When you look at the fact that you've kind of got a balancing scale, if you were a 21-year-old, another year would be a phenomenal thing to get older. If you're 40-ish, and we certainly see times when people are running 41, 42, 43, so you're not past that window. But obviously, you're one of those athletes where, we don't want this to be delayed 3 more years or 4 more years. I want my chance to go in there as a 40 or 41-year-old. Mm-hmm. Do you see that extra year as a benefit in some ways to you, however, because you're in that kind of still a young marathoner? It's not like you've run 20 of these and, you kind of lost the desire. Is that extra 12 months going to be beneficial in your mind for you and Graham to be able to do some things that you wouldn't have been able to get accomplished, knowing that you would have had to go from your 224 right into probably the next marathon maybe would have been at the Olympics?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I'll do another marathon between now and then, but definitely a year stronger. And I think maybe the year off kind of has bought me an extension to my career like triathlon did. So, my goal now is to make it right through to 2024. And now the games are only 3 years apart, so why not? And when we saw that the races were all shutting down in the spring, we actually really shut things down as well. So I took 2 or 3 months and kind of nursed a niggling injury, got that under control, took a fun summer of camping and hiking and that sort of thing with my kids. So took the intensity and the volume off for a few months because it didn't seem that there was any point of just pretending there were races. And then I'm only now getting back into good, decent fitness. I've been back several months, but I'm only now starting to see that I'm kind of back to that level of training that I was a year ago. But now we're only, 8 months away, and it makes sense to be training harder again.
A lot of athletes in their late 30s start losing sponsors. You're picking them up. Talk about how amazing to have Saucony come on board and some of the little science testing that you guys have kind of done, because it's been an odd, 12 or 18 months of talking about shoes and shoe technology. But a world-class company that really believed in you as a person, not just as an athlete. So maybe just mention Saucony and kind of how you made those decisions around their shoes. Was it good for you, and the science that you've kind of looked at that's been involved in those shoes?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the shoes are great, phenomenal shoes. So first and foremost, I know that running in the shoes, I'm not giving up any time. But secondly, and as important, or perhaps more importantly, being with a company with strong brand values, that are trying to be really community builders. You can see from the other athletes that they have partners with and the initiatives that they take on and the events that they sponsor, that they really believe in the running community and the people involved in it. And so that was, we had a pretty lengthy discussion starting back in about February or March about what a partnership would look like. And I'm really keen to help them and to be supported by them and grateful for that. And I think things have changed in terms of what I want out of a sponsor too, because I have a job, my husband has a job. Like, this is for us now, this running project is for fun. I'm not trying to, like when I was 20, trying to scrape pennies together to pay for a cup of coffee. So I feel like I have a lot more flexibility in what I do and who I partner with. And so I think we're mutually happy about moving forward together.
Do you see, I mean, certainly those of us out there watching see you as a role model. You're a world-class athlete, you've got some degrees, you've got life skills, you're a wife, you're a mother, there's other charities and things that you work with. Do you kind of see that you're all of those things, or do you just see yourself as, some mom who runs pretty fast a couple times a year?
All of the above. Depends on the minute, right?
Well, we love that for sure. Last kind of little bits of advice. Probably over half of all the people that were in the Nouveau Iron Eggnog Jog were women. A lot of 14, 15, 16-year-old young ladies getting started into the sport. What would be your kind of, whether it's the 14, 15-year-olds or the 50-year-old kind of moms, what would your kind of couple bits of advice be for those who've kind of taken up your sport? Maybe they have not been in sport long enough to know who Malindi Elmore is, but they'll go Google you and find out more about you. And we'll put links on the side. But what would be the advice for those kind of populations of women who now are taking up running?
Well, I'm loving seeing how many girls are picking up the sport in my high school group. Now we've got way more girls than boys, which a few years ago was the reverse. And all the way up, like I coach online with a number of really strong women across the country now, which is really, really rewarding for me to help them with their goals. And they're also similar to me, balancing work and kids and trying to have legitimately fast running goals. Like I'm talking, running PBs in the 240s, 250s, Boston qualifiers, like that's super awesome for me. And I think the thing that I really believe in from my experience and from watching other people through the years is just finding a joy in the process. And the results follow, but you have to truly enjoy the journey and not be focused on, the destination. And then secondly, engaging in a really great community, because I think that's the thing that this sport brings people together. And I think that's what keeps us together, is the feeling that we're all pursuing running together, but we're all supportive of each other in each other's goals.
And would I be overly biased if I said that some of these young ladies should probably think about hopping on a bicycle or in the pool occasionally just to multi-sport, and maybe they might be the next Carol Montgomery or, the next Flora Duffy who's out there, Gwen Jorgensen, et cetera?
Or a Paula Finley or a Joanna Brown. There's Simon. There's great examples. Kristen Woodfine. I think, again, what I think about is my university coach, and we would have a push-up competition multiple times a year. And she was like, you need to be an athlete before you can be a fast runner. So the better you can be at multiple sports, I think that ultimately the better you'll be at one sport.
I can't tell you how excited I was to have a chance to chat to you. I have spent some time with you privately, but we haven't had a lot of time since your incredible marathon. And I know that all of Canada will be looking to Tokyo next year, and it'll be a fantastic opportunity to see a woman who's continuing to get faster as she gets older. And the kids will be getting at the age where they'll really be excited to understand that mommy is an Olympian. Probably a few years ago, they wouldn't quite have understood that, but the extra year will get some more benefits. They'll be able to put things in context as well.
Yeah, a quick funny story about my older son who's 6. So Saucony, they sent him some shoes, and I've never seen someone so excited. But then he comes to me next week and he says, so mommy, when do I get Endorphin Pros?
Well, that'll be down the road. Listen, say hello to Graham for me. I will be watching your career, and if you're ever back east and you have some time to come jogging with some young women just north of Toronto, I'd love to pick you up and bring you for a nice run through the trails.
All right, let's do that someday.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Malindi Elmore, a legend. The family's got Olympic rings coming out of the drawers, and they're going to be adding one more in Tokyo next year. So thank you, Malindi.
Thanks.